Beginning current Daf and Mesechta Megillah Daf. Begin 3 lines down at the top of the Yomi. But the Gemara continues with the discussion related from the previous Daf, which our previous mission was discussing the topic of the Tarek B'nei Ha'ir, if they're allowed to sell a shul, what can they do with it? And the Gemara is regarding selling a shul to make it into Beis Medrash, or Beis Medrash to make it into shul. Which one is greater? And that we continue with that discussion. Hashiz goes by Bakazach and Cheskel to any time Daf Chaim is joining us for today's Daf. Some of the things we're discussing today's Daf are Machur Taira La'ikhu Svar. The townspeople sold the Sefer Torah. They're not allowed to use the proceeds to purchase Sifrei Nach. Somebody one may not use the proceeds of an item of higher sanctity, purchase one of lower sanctity. Moisreihin, whether the same restrictions apply to money left over from a permitted purchase and not just regarding the primary purchase. Gemara also discusses Limkar Sefer Torah Yashin to sell an old Sefer Torah to purchase a new Sefer Torah. Mechiras Beis HaKnesses, various halachas regarding the sale of a shul, including Shal Rab Yachid, whether it's permitted to sell a public shul to be used for individual use of a shul. Mem Kra'elam, whether it's permitted to sell a shul permanently. And Arba Dvarim, whether it can be then used for various disrespectful purposes. Tzadech Beribis is whether a transaction is permitted if there exists a possibility that it's going to be voided, and hence it's going to result that any benefit that the buyer had up until this point was essentially a loan, which he was actually getting ribis, he was actually getting interest on by his using the utility because he got the money back as it was. Lahashkin Mayim, whether it's permitted to urinate within 4 amos of a place where a person has already davened. So we begin the card, Daf Chav 3 lines down at the top of the Yom, Darish Bar Kapara. This is directly related back to the previous lines we had just said, that in regards to we would say it's mistaber like Rav Papi, that you're allowed to sell a shul to make it into Beis Medrash, because we have Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg that says like that, which the Gemara expounds right now. Darish Bar Kapara. So Megillah said, wasn't it pasuk Malachim Beis? The Yisruf is Beis Hashem, that he burned the house of God, Beis HaMelech, the house of the king, Beis Kol Bat Yerushalayim, all the homes of Yerushalayim, Beis Kol Bayis Gadol Sar of Be'esh, and this talking about Nebuzradan, the Rasha, that he came and he destroyed Yerushalayim. So it says all these things he destroyed, and Kol Bayis Gadol, every large house, every great house, Sar of Be'esh, he burned in fire. What does it mean? These terminologies. So Beis Hashem, the house of God, that's obviously Beis HaMikdash. That's the temple. Beis HaMelech, the house of the king, Elu Paltan and Shalmel. These are the palaces of the king. There's Kol Bat Yerushalayim, that's Kamashwan, that's like the small understanding, the homes of Yerushalayim. When it says there's Kol Bayis Gadol sort of Be'esh, that every great home he burnt in fire, what is the Bayis HaGadol? So Machlik Shabiyach and Shuma Levi. Chadam one says in Malkum Shemegadon by Torah, it's a place where they amplify Torah. Chadam Malkum Shemegadon by Tefillah, the other one says the place where they amplify prayer. As the Gemara explains each opinion. Mandam Torah, the one who says that it's Torah, this is like it says in Yeshaya. Hashem chavetz l'matzis. Hashem desired for His righteousness. Yagdil Torah, but He amplifies Torah and He makes it awesome. So again, you see that the word Yagdil is appropriate for Torah. Mandam Tefillah, the one who says it's referring to prayer. That's what he says. Malachim Beis. Says Sapra no. Please tell Hagadolos Hashas Elisha the great things that Elisha did. So it says Gadol regarding what Elisha did. Elisha David, what did Elisha do? But Achmed David, whatever he did it with davening. And therefore you see that Gadol is appropriate for Tefillah. So that's the machlekes when it says that he burnt the great homes, the great Bayis HaGedolim. Is that referred to the shuls or to the Batei Madrashim? It says the Gemara Tzitayim, let's prove there's a sign that Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, he's the one who holds that it's a place where they amplify learning of Torah. Which again, like we said, that means to say Beis Medrash is greater than that of a shul, and therefore we said you could sell a shul to build make it into a Beis Medrash. He says that halacha. He says Beis HaKnesses mutar la'asos Beis HaMedrash. A shul you're allowed to make it into Beis HaMedrash. Obviously, Beis HaMedrash is the Bayis HaGadol, is the great home. Obviously, you see that he's the one that said Bayis HaGadol, because when we had brought the machlekes, we didn't know who said which one. We could obviously show that he's the one who held it's a Beis HaMedrash. Now we said in the Mishnah that Avol, what we said you could do and can't do because you have to be upgrading in sanctity. So we said, if you sold the Sefer Torah, you can't not buy a Svarim of Nach. Let's say shul has 10 Sefer Torah, but they want to be Mahadir and they want to have the actual scrolls when they lay Daf Torah. So, look, let's sell a Sefer Torah and we'll buy a whole set of Nach. No, you're not allowed to. So you go with the following question. Okay, so you cannot downgrade. But Ma'olim Sefer Torah Yasha, what's halacha? Can you sell an old Sefer Torah to buy a new Sefer Torah? We have these old Sfarim, we have an old shul, a synagogue that's been out in the Catskills for 57 years, and the Sfarim are old. Someone out in the Hicks can use it, but we want to have a new Sefer Torah. Can we sell the old one to buy a new one? So the Gemara explains, what's the question? On the one hand, keep in mind, since you're not upgrading in sanctity, Usher, it's forbidden because we say you have to be Ma'al B'Kodesh. You're not going higher than a Sefer Torah. Like Dilma, maybe no. Kimda like a there's no more upgrade. The Sefer Torah is the highest on the totem pole. You can't get anything higher. So Shabbat Dami. So as long as you're not downgrading, it would be permitted. So the Gemara says Tashma Tzvika right from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said, as we just quoted before, don't buy Svarim of Nach, the scrolls of Nach for that. Oh, so the diuk, the inference is Svarim who delight. You cannot purchase a Sefer Yeshaya, you can't purchase a Sefer Shmuel, but a Torah b'Torah. But if you want to buy a Sefer Torah with that old Sefer Torah, and Shabbat Dami sounds like that would be okay. Says the Gemara, no, it's not a raya, because Masnitin Diyevet. Our Mishnah is talking about after the fact. You already sold it, because like that's what the Mishnah said. Machru Torah, you sold the Torah. So, okay, in that situation, yes, it would be permitted to purchase with its monies a Sefer Torah, because if not, what are you going to buy with the monies? We said, if you sold it, don't buy a Sefer Nach. What do you do then? Yes, the diak is buy a Sefer Torah. But Kikam and Bailan, our question was Likatchila, initially, can I go ahead and sell a Sefer Torah to buy a new Sefer Torah? So the Gemara says, Tashma Tzvika Raya from the following Brisa. Brisa says, Goylin Sefer Torah, you could wrap a Sefer Torah, b'mitpachis chumashim, with the mantle of a chumash. We're talking. It's a Sefer Torah that only has 1/5 of a Sefer Torah. It has what we call a chumash, which is really from the word chaimish, which is a fifth. So that's an upgrade for the mantle. You can use it to wrap a Sefer Torah. And b'chumashim, you can wrap a chumash b'mitpachis nevim ksuvim with the mantle, which is the cloak of the navi and the ksuvim. Avol, but lo nevim ksuvim b'mitpachis chumashim. You cannot take that which used to wrap a chumash and now wrap a nevim ksuvim because you're downgrading the sanctity of that mantle. Neither can you go ahead and wrap a chumash with the mantle that used to cover Sefer Torah. Okay. Tell me, one thing we see in the Brisa is Goylem Sefer Torah b'mitpachos chumashim, that you can go ahead and wrap a Sefer Torah with the mantle of a chumash because you're upgrading the mantle to now have a higher sanctity. Now the inference is mitpachos chumashim in. Yes, you could use the mantle of a chumash and use that for a Sefer Torah. But mitpachas Sefer Torah loy, you cannot take the mantle of one Sefer Torah and use it to wrap another Sefer Torah. Obviously, you cannot change something even to equal level. It's got to be upgraded. Because you see, you can't take a mantle of one for another one. If you're changing it to something else, it's got to be upgrading. So you see that you cannot sell a Sefer Torah to buy another Sefer Torah because you're not upgrading. Says, no, it's not a right, because look at the Sefer. Look at the Sefer of the Brisa. Sefer of the Brisa says, V'loy chumashim b'mitpachas Sefer Torah. You cannot go ahead and wrap a chumash with the mantle of a Sefer Torah because it's downgrading it. So the inference is only downgrading is a problem. Meaning you brought me a riot from the Brisa that said you got to be upgrading, but look at the other part of the Brisa. It just says you cannot be downgrading. HaTorah b'Torah Shabbat Dami. But if you wrap one Torah with another Torah, as long as you're not downgrading, it would be okay. So the Gemara says you can't really infer from this Brisa because the diuk of either one, the one that says the upgrade is okay, infers, but the horizontal is not okay, the equal is not okay. But then you could be medayek from the one that says the downgrade is problematic to say, but if it's not downgrading, it is okay. So it's not a good deal. So the Gemara says Tashma Tzvika right from the following Brisa. Brisa says, what happens if, let's say, you have no room inside the Aron or wherever it is that you're transporting Sefer Torah? So you can put one Sefer Torah on top of another Sefer Torah. And b'Torah gab b'chamashim, you can put a Torah on top of a chumash. B'chamashim gab nevim ksuvim, you can put a chumash on top of nevim ksuvim. Aval, but you can't do it the other way around. Lo nevim ksuvim gab b'chamashim, you can't put a sefer navi or ksuvim on. Can't put a tilim on top of a chumash. V'lo chamashim gab Torah, you can't put a chumash on top of a sefer Torah. But one thing you see from the first halacha, the Brisa said you could put a sefer Torah on the sefer Torah. So we see, as long as it's equivalent, it's okay to treat them with the same sanctity. So you see, it doesn't have to be upgrading as long as it's not downgrading. No, hanacha kamrid. Are you talking about placing? Placing is different because it's not possible. We have to put the svarim in the sefer Torahs. We have to put one on top of the other. And as the Gemara proves that the hanacha is not a raya about placing, because the ilay tamachim, if you don't say that placing is different because you just don't have any other option, how are you able to wrap a sefer Torah? But you have one page that's rolled on the other one. And it's disgraceful for the page beneath it. Since it's not possible to roll a Sefer Torah without that, sure, it's permitted. Here also because you have to put the Sefer Torah somewhere and you're putting one on top of the other, it's going to be different and there's no raya for the question that we have regarding selling one Sefer Torah to purchase another Sefer Torah. So the says, okay, come in here, let's bring a raya. Because the Amar Rabbi Bavachon he says, Lo Yimkar Adam Sefer Torah Yashan. He says clearly, a person should not sell an old Sefer Torah Likir by Chadash to buy a new one. So that clearly answers the question. The Gemara says, no, that's also not a raya. Why? Hasa Mishum Pshiusa. There it's because of negligence. We're concerned that you're going to sell the Sefer Torah. You're not going to buy a new Sefer Torah because you end up needing the money for something else. The money is going to get used up and wasted. And therefore we say, no. You cannot sell the old Sefer Torah to buy a new Sefer Torah. But, Kikamin, when did we have our question? Was Kegoin Dechsiv. This new Sefer Torah is already written by the Sefer. Umanach Lefruki, it's waiting to be purchased, to be redeemed. The only thing that you're waiting for is to give the money. What's the halacha? I sell my old Sefer Torah and then purchase the new Sefer Torah from the Sefer. That we're not concerned for Pshius. There's no negligence because it's right there. The transfer, you're going to go and sell the money right away, switch the funds right away. That we're not concerned about. So that's the shaila we have. The shaila we don't have is on Pshius. We only have is us not upgrading and it's just keeping it the same.
Maybe it's upgrading. Is that kind of a value?
Yeah. Could be, right? But then it becomes very subjective about, that's an upgrade. Yeah, the Gemara on Amud Beis is going to have a similar type of discussion. But it's in the gray, because objectively it's the same thing. It's Sefer Torah. You want to know, would that be considered an upgrade? But it's not really an upgrade in sanctity. But Zekel Mamei, or Zekel Mamei did in Sefer Torah, Zekel Mamei its own mitzvah in Sefer Torah lane. It's not really an upgrade. Yeah, good shayla. So the Gemara says, what would be halacha, again, in the case that we're saying that it's ready to be bought, we just have to get the funds. So the Gemara says, Tashma, come here, let's bring a raya from the following halacha. It says, Ein moichem Sefer Torah. Person now let's sell a Sefer Torah, only for two things. One is Lumad Torah, which means say to support yourself in Koil when you're learning Torah, you got a Yerusha from the Zayda, you got the Sefer Torah from the family Sefer Torah. Just don't tell the relatives. You sell the Sefer Torah, and then you learn Koil for another 10 years. Now, the assumption of the Gemara right now is actually the same thing would be to purchase Sefer Torah because they're both about Torah. You could sell Torah for more Torah. And Balisa Isha to go ahead and get married, to a woman. So you must say, Shmami, no, you've heard from this, Torah b'Torah Shavadami. Switching Torah for Torah is okay. Someone says, no, Dilmashani Liban, maybe learning Torah, Zitzning Kail, that's different. Shahaliman maybe the Maisa. Learning Torah is more important than writing your Sefer Torah. Because learning of Torah brings a person to action. And the main thing we want is even to be able to live a Torah Diga life. Having a Sefer Torah could be Monachas Bukuvsa, it could just be sitting over there, it's not doing anything. So sitting and learning, yes, maybe you could tell Sefer Torah to go and sit in Kail. But who said that you could go ahead and sell a Sefer Torah to buy a new Sefer Torah? That wouldn't be a right. And even Ishanami, so you say, well, why a woman is more important to marry a woman and be able to sell a Sefer Torah? Yeah, because the Pasuk says in Yeshai, this is the purpose of creation. Lisehu balaha. But it's not for emptiness that Hashem created the world. L'sheves yitzava. He formed it that people should settle the earth. And therefore it's very important to have children because to propagate, Hashem wants the place to be inhabited. I make a simcha, I want people to come. No one comes, it's snowing outside, and there's a bris today in the morning, and I made all the food and this and that. Hashem said, I made a beautiful world, I want people to come. So the purpose of the creation is to have people come to the party, which is having children. I'll tell you about but to switch one Sefer Torah for another Sefer Torah, no, who said you couldn't? And that's actually where the Gemara ends. The Gemara does not bring a proof to this Shiloh if you could sell an old Sefer Torah to purchase a new Sefer Torah, because yes, although you could sell it for getting married, because that's purpose creation. To learn Torah is also the purpose, because then the person will have lamasa, he'll actually live like a yid. But a Sefer Torah, it's not necessarily that you could do that. The Torah in the Brisa, the Yim called him Sefer Torah, furthering just this last halacha that we should bring a raya from. So the Brisa says, a person will sell Sefer Torah, even if he doesn't need the Sefer Torah, because he has another Sefer Torah, he has 10 Sefer Torah. Doesn't make a difference, he's not sold the Sefer Torah. And more than this, Rabbi Shloimy says that afila in l'mayoichel, even though he doesn't have what to eat, umacha Sefer Torah, and he sells a Sefer Torah, or he sells his daughter, he'll never see a sign of blessing forever, which Rashi adds this on many times in Shas, not that he'll never see bracha in his life ever again, with those proceeds of those monies that he sold the Sefer Torah's daughter, he's never going to see bracha with that at all. Again, a person's not supposed to sell a Sefer Torah, and neither his daughter. And but again, for two things he's allowed to, if it's to get married and if it's to learn Torah. So continuing with the law of the Mishnah, we said that you're not allowed to downgrade a sale of a holy item. And says the Mishnah, it's not only for the primary funds, Even if you have some leftover funds, even that cannot be downgraded. Now, Amar Rava, so Rava qualifies this teaching. He says, Lishanu, we only learned this, when we're talking about extra funds, how did you get the extra funds? Meaning, you sold one of these holy items, let's say a Sefer Torah or a shul or whatever, this and that, and you purchased from some of the monies something that had a higher sanctity, but then you still have some leftover funds. It doesn't match up exactly all the time when you're transferring funds. That leftover funds, okay, it's still the leftovers from a shul that was there, and therefore you still have to upgrade it. Aval, but there's a different way of having extra funds. Gavoy, let's say they collected money from the tzibur. Let's say they wanted to write a Sefer Torah. The shul is making a Sefer Torah. We're going to make a Sefer Torah. They went, they took all the monies, they bought a Sefer Torah, but then they had leftover funds because there was more than what the Sefer was asking for. So on that mutter, that actually you could downgrade those funds because it was never yet used for a severe sanctity. It's only leftovers if you sold the Sefer Torah, you sold the shul, and now you want to use it to buy a Sefer Torah. Okay, it's the sanctity from a shul. But if you have leftovers because of what you collected, you had a GoFundMe, a drive, whatever, all these different raisits and whatever, and you have extra funds, even though that was for this, that wouldn't have to be used for a more severe sanctity, even though you're not using it for this thing. Now, however, Rabbi asked on Rava from the following brisa. We said in the Mishnah that this halacha of Mailam Kodesh. So the brisa qualifies, says, Bamedvam, when we say you have to be Mailam Kodesh, you have to upgrade in the sanctity, is Shalei Hisnu. Is only if they didn't stipulate originally that we want to do whatever we want to do with the monies. Then, if they didn't stipulate, then you have the halacha of the Mishnah that you have to upgrade. Abel Hisnu, but if let's say they had stipulated that we want to do whatever we want with the monies, then Afila which I'm going to explain shortly what that is. Even for that, mutter, you're allowed to use the funds for even that. So the Gemara says, wait a second, hey Chadami, what's the case of the Bryce talking about? If it's talking about Shemachru Vahisidai, we're talking about where they had, let's say, a shul, and they sold the shul, and they purchased a Sefer Torah, which is an upgrade of the sanctity, and they have leftover funds. So Kihisnu Mahava, I don't understand the Bryce then. Who cares that they stipulated when they're selling, like, oh, we're selling the shul on the condition that the leftover funds we want to use for, let's say, betting for Chinese auctions. I don't know, whatever they. But it's sanctified money. It doesn't help. It has kedusha from the shul. So Ella rather says more obviously should go v'ayisirei. Obviously, when we're talking about leftover funds, we mean that they collected. The shul is collecting they want to write a Sefer Torah, and they have leftover funds. That's what it's talking about. And therefore, you can make the following diuk. Time of the Hisnu, the reason is that when they made the collections, they stipulated. The fine print said that we want that if there's leftover funds, we're going to do with it whatever we want to with the leftover funds. We're going to pay the president, or we're going to whatever it is. Halay Hisnu light sounds like okay, but if they didn't stipulate, then what? Then no, you can't use the leftover funds for whatever you want to use it for. It has to still be for that thing, or you have leftovers you don't need. So it's got to upgrade it. So it's not like Rava. Rava said that if you have leftover funds from what you collected, that you don't have this halacha ma'al b'kodesh. But it seems to be not like that from the diuk of the brisa. It sounds like that only because you stipulated, which we said obviously only in the case of gavu, and then but it sounds like if you didn't stipulate, then not. So the Gemara says no, it's not true. It's not difficult in Rava. The truth is, it is talking about that they sold the shul and they bought a Sefer Torah with it and they have some leftover funds. So wait a second. So he said, what is that t'nai? How does that t'nai help? When I'm selling the shul, I'm making it condition. What do you mean you make a condition? You can't make such a condition. The shul has a sanctity. Where's it going? It has to be upgraded. No, but this is what the Bryce was saying. But when we say that it has to be Mailam Kodesh, it's not a regular stipulation. We're saying that it was not stipulated on by the 7 board members of the city, but Mailam shiur in the presence and with the permission of the people of the city. That's where then you're limited to the halacha of Mailam Kodesh. But if let's say it's stipulated by the 7 board members of the city in the presence and with the acquiescence of the people of the city, that's what saying it's permitted. Which Taisa asks, wait a second, if you're talking about Shiva Tevei, why are you talking about the Meister then? Why are you talking about leftover funds? Not even the leftover funds, even if the primary funds. We had said already that the Shiva Tevei you can do whatever you want to. So he says, you're right. The reason why I said by Vahisidra is to tell you the other side of the Chiddush. That even by the leftover funds, you need to have the T'nai of the Shiva Tevei. Because you would have thought to say that, okay, if you put from the primary monies a double kedusha and leftover, that you could do with the leftovers whatever you want, or even without a stipulation. That's to say no. But you're right, the Shiva Tebe'ir is not only for leftover funds, they can even do on the primary sale. Then you could sell a shul if you're doing the Shiva Tebe'ir, and you can buy whatever you want with it. You're not limited to buying even the primary. But we're saying even the leftovers would need to have the Shiva Tebe'ir to be able to, that you can do whatever you want to. So therefore it's not difficult in Rabbah. Now, the Gemara explains, only Abaya lahum rabban. Abaya, just to clarify a terminology we said in the previous brisa, Abai said to one of the rabbis that Masad Masnita committed Rav Sheshes, they used to organize his brises in front of Rav Sheshes. Says, Mish Milach Rav Sheshes, did you hear from Rav Sheshes my Dechsusia? Because we had this in the brisa, we said that if it was the Shiva Tebe'ir, we're selling it, you can even purchase Dechsusia with it. So do you know what Dechsusia, you ever heard from Rav Sheshes? Because you're always in front of him, the God Lador, you're always in front of him and you're going over the brises? So Malay says, yes, Rav Sheshes said, Parasha the Masa. It means that the people of the city would hire a person to ride on the horse that should always be ready for them to send a message to the governor whenever they need to. So that's what it says. Even for the chsusia, they could use those monies to pay that taxi driver who always goes to send the message to the governor. So Abai commented. He says, "Hilkach therefore haitzum rabbanim." A Talmudic scholar, the Shamalei Milsa, if he hears something, but the other producer doesn't know how to explain it, like here they didn't know what the chsusia meant. The Shaila Kamei the Shchich Kamei Rabban, they should ask the one that's always frequently in front of the rabbis, because the Le'evsh is not possible. The Leishmilim and Gavad Rabbi, they didn't hear from the great person what it actually means. So this person that always Dreitzach from Chaim Kanievsky and is always there, and he's writing his farm, editing his farm, is always there. For their game, he's always there. He'll for sure heard, what this means, and you don't know a word. Ask him because you see that the ends of Gedrei B'Rav Sheshes, and therefore obviously that he knew the answer what the Chsusim means. Now, a related discussion regarding what we're discussing over here of Takane Sa'ir, like this of the horse rider that would always run, and regarding things of the city. So I'm going to be Yechad Meshur Meir. It says Bnei Ha'ir Shahol Lir Acheres. If you have people from one city that goes to another city, and in that other city, Upaskalein Tzedakah, they make they every single person of the city has to give tzedakah. So this person who's visiting now, they make him also donate for the cause of tzedakah. So the halach is noisnin. So that person from the other city should give to the gabbai tzedakah of that city, so that they shouldn't suspect him that he's pledging and he's not giving. But when they're coming back home to where they live, they could go and collect from the charity collector, and they take those monies with them, and they provide for the poor of their own city. So although there was a big, the people are pledging, and when you're there, everyone's pledging $1,000, $1,000, $2,000, whatever, and you also, so you pledge, give it to the Gabbat Stock of that shul, but when you're leaving, take and go bring it back, because you have to provide for the people of your city. You only should give because it shouldn't look like you're pledging and not giving, but really you have an obligation to give to the poor of your city first. In the Brisa, but if you have people of a city that go to another city, and that's the main idea, where they put on you a certain amount that you have to give, so nice, and so give. But when you're coming back, you bring the money back with you. And that's obviously with that understanding that that's what you're doing. It's just that people shouldn't suspect you, so you give it to that Gabbat Tzedakah until you leave. Now, however, but if let's say you're an individual that goes to another city, and they pledge on him for charity, I say then you give it to the poor of that city. It's only when you go with a rabbin, but if you're an individual, then you actually give it to the people of that city. The Gemara brings a story related to this halacha. Rav Huna goes to Tanisa. Rav Huna declared a public fast, and all the Gabei Rav Chana Bar Chanila v'Chabani Masi. So Rav Chana Bar Chanila and all the people of his city, they came to the public fast. They go to MetLife. The people from New Jersey, they're going to New York. They're going to the big tinus that they're making. The Al Rabunim, Al Rabbis, all the Roshivas, all there, and they came to. Now, Ramalai tzedakah, so in the moment of inspiration, they says, okay, we're going to give tzedakah, and everyone is going to pledge. Bihavu. So everyone gave from all over, from the whole tri-state area. Kiboy Lamese, when they wanted to go back home to Lakewood, Amalai, they said to him, so let the master give us our monies, and we'll go. But the Father will provide for the poor of our city. We have our own Temchei Shabbos, we have our own tzedakahs. He said to them, yeah, but today we learned the Brisa that says, but when do we say this? Is b'she'ein sham as a continuum of base chaver ir. That's only if that the city that you went to that put on you tzedakah, they don't have a Talmid Chacham that's engaged in the tzarchei tzibur. But if there's someone at Talmid Chacham that's engaged like the Rav of this shul is a kahal mensch. So then tinasan l'chaveir, then you should give it to the chaveir, and it actually stays in that town because he's going to do the right thing with those monies. And he says, and anyways, for sure, you think you're in Jersey, I'm in New York. All your poor come to me anyway. So anyways, you keep the money by me because I'm a chaveir, and zweitens, all your poor people that you're taking the money back to give to them, guess who they come to? They call up my number, and they're coming to me anyway. So therefore, it says, leave the money by me. Then I'll love the next Mishnah. Continuing the theme regarding what are you allowed to sell to purchase something else, which you're not allowed to downgrade the sanctity of, let's say, a shul. So the Mishnah says, Ein moichin eshel rabim liyachid. You cannot sell a shul of the public, like such a shul over here, this is a publicly owned shul, liyachid, to that of an individual. Like a person is going to use his eigene shtibel, he needs a place to buy his boidedes, he needs a platz. So you can't sell the shul to an individual because you downgraded from its sanctity. That's a very mayor. So Amalai, they said to him, if that's the case, then you shouldn't be able to sell the shul. Let's say a modular shul. You can't sell it from a large city to a small city because it's also a downgrade.
The shul stays in the same place.
What? Right, that's not saying modular. That's not saying if you take the shul and you make it.
So what's shaykh to a small city?
No, meaning let's say it would be
Small kehillah?
yeah.
But the potential is there.
Potential. You tell a guy, he's marry this guy, he's got potential, but now he's a in the gas and there's a full mensch, potential, you know. But right now, I'm saying you're taking it down the sanctity from Ir Gedela, Ir Katana, and then they said, so like, again, it's like we said before when we talked about Aman Aleph, it's very great to say, like, okay, you know, it's is it downgrading, is it not downgrading, you know, it's a shul. So what are you talking about? You could sell it from a tzibah to a yachid, because if not, then every time you should be able to declare, is it downgrading or not, if it's from Ir Gedela, Ir Katana. So the Gemara says, Shabbat Kamalei Rabban Lemei. So it seems to be a good taina. In the Mishnah, Rabban had to a mayor that why does he hold you cannot sell a shul of a tzibur to that of a yachid? So the Gemara says, Rabbi he would tell you, no. No. From a large city to a small city, a große Keila, a Chasidus with millionen Menschen, a Chasidus with the drastic mention. Meikar Kadisha, in the beginning it was holy, and Hashtanam Kadisha, now it's also holy. It's for a minion. But Merabli Yochid like a Kedusha. It's not true. When you're selling from a tzibur, let's say a shul was used for minyanim we have over here, and then the person wants to have his own shul, can't deal with people anymore. You know, people are too difficult. He needs his own shul with his own svarim. He's going to come in. He's going to use it himself. There's no more sanctity. You know why? Rashi says you don't say davar shebekdusha less than 10 people. So it's not considered a makam of kedusha. So therefore, you can't compare from an irgedel likatana in the same way of comparing from a rabbin to a yachid. Now, for Rabbanan, they would tell you, no, it's not true. Because if you're going to be concerned between many to a few, so then it's not true. You should also be concerned, just like you're concerned from 40 people, from 50 people, 100, whatever, how many are in the shul, 200, 300, 500, whatever. Till like a guy was doing it individual. Then actually, even from, let's say, a shul of 500 to a shul of 200, should also be the same concern. Because of famous pasuk in Mishnah, the multitude of the people is Hadras Melech, is the glory of the king. And therefore, you're never going to be able to find that you could sell a shul. Because then any time it's a small thing, it is a change, because you don't have B'rei Am anymore. So obviously, as like Rashi explains, the Rabban Hol were not concerned, because since you're taking the monies, and you're upgrading the monies to something higher, meaning whoever's selling the shul will use the money to buy a Sefer Torah. So the buyer could do with it whatever he wants to, and yes, he could use it for his own private shul, and actually he could even do more with it, except, as we'll see in the Sefer, which is our next Mishnah, that there's 4 disgraceful activities that you can't use, but someone could buy this shul, and the shul here will, in the next door, this next palace, they'll make a shul and buy a Sefer Torah with those funds. And therefore they disagree with Yomei, because if you were differentiating, then even from a Yegedel Ketana should be a problem, because you won't have B'rei Am Hadras Melech anymore. Because someone who buys this shul will open up his kleine shtibel and he'll have a fifth of the amount of people. That's also a chesar. It's also downgrading. Now B'rei Am, obviously not concerned. We continue to look at the next Mishnah that continues on this theme. Same words of Ein Meichern. Ein Meichern Beis HaKnesses. You're not allowed to sell a shul il al Tanai. only on condition, which is, what's the condition? Shem yirtzu, that if they want to, yachziruhu, that they could take it back. That's the Remeir. And as Rashi adds on the words, that even when you're selling from one tzibur to another tzibur, Remeir says you're not allowed to make a conclusive sale, because it's a disgrace. It's almost like, we don't care about this, we don't need this anymore. And that's not appropriate. So if you're going to sell a shul, don't sell it indefinitely. Say, if we ever want to back out, we can back out. Okay, but Chachamim, they disagree, so it's not true. You could sell an eternal sale, and as Rashi adds in the words, as we see from the previous Mishnah, that even if he's selling to a yachid, a regular person is buying it, and he could do whatever he wants with this shul, except for 4 things he cannot make this shul into. You cannot make it lemerchas, not make it a bathhouse. You can't make it lebursi. That's an old thing. We said we still have to get the old days, get this bathhouse back again. The Schwitz is not. We can't make this into a whole spa. Lebursiki can't make it into a tanning place where they tan leather. Letvila can't make it into a mikvah. And lebeis hamayim can't turn it into a, either it means to say a laundromat, or which makes a lot of money, so it would be a short okay? And you can't make it into what Rashi calls base meiraglaim. It's urinals. You can't make that into these 4 things. That would be disgraceful. But everything else, you could sell the shul and they could do whatever they want with it. Rabbi Yudaimer, he's a third opinion. He says, you can sell it as a courtyard, and the one who buys it could do what he wants to. But he says it's like a chatzir, but you can't do anything less than that. So the Gemara says, okay, so the Gemara goes back to the opening opinion. Ura Meir. According to the Meir that said, okay, you want to sell the shul? No problem, someone could buy the shul. But you have to stipulate in the contract saying if we want to back out, we can back out. Because it's disgraceful, like, okay, we don't care about the shul, it's sold. No, there always has to be the ability that the shul could get it back. So it says the Gemara, whoever buys the property of the shul, how could he live over there, ribis, but you could run into a problem of ribis. What's the problem about ribis? If the shul ever ends up taking it back, so, okay, here's the $3.7 million of this property that the shul sold it for, and this Geviri who's living next door to the new shul, they say, look, we want it back. So he says, okay, here, give me back my $3.7 million. But over these last 5 years, because we want the youth minyan got so big, there's no room in the new shul, we want the whole building just a youth minyan. Right? We want it back, because it's in the contract. So he said, okay, fine, give me back my 3.7. I said, fine, okay, that means the last 5 years he lived over here. He had lent the shul 3.7 million, and he got interest. 5 years of living over here, rent-free, he made all that money. So how, according to Remeir, could you ever do this? The person who's living over there is making interest on the money that he lent the congregation. Some of Yechoneh says it's not difficult, because Remeir b'shitz Rabbi Huda. Remeir is going in the opinion of Rabbi Huda. The Dhamma that he says what's called tzad echad beribis. Tzad echad means to say that there's 2 ways this can go. And there's only one way that's going to be ribis, which is not definitive, is not definite. Mutter, that's actually going to be permitted. We don't have the isser of ribis. And Taisa points out, because of other places in Shas, that he shows that it's only because here it's not through a loan. Here it's really through a sale. The sale could turn into a retroactive loan. It's a sale. The shul is selling it. But it turns out that they want to back out of the sale. It turns out essentially it was a loan. The monies that we're giving you back, like we had the monies all the time, we were investing or whatever, we're doing or whatever, and we're giving it back to you. But if it was derech halvot, it says it would be problematic. But tzad echad beribis, if there's only one option, which we're talking about, there's only one option, meaning the other option, if it stayed a sale, it would never be ribis, because it was a sale. But there is an option for it to end up being ribis, but it's only one side, not both of them. That's actually mutter. Rabbi Yehuda holds that is permitted. It's not a problem, even if it ends up being ribis. Ribis is only a problem if it's a clear cut ribis. I'm lending you this $1 million. If you give me 20%, 30%, 50%, don't get greedy, people do, on my money, right? And I want it back. They sound like learn the Bryce. What's this machlekes? If someone was collecting by his friend a mana, which means that he lent him a mana, and the guy owed him a mana. So ba'asli sadehu mecher. So he made his field as a sale. Meaning, essentially he said, look, if I don't pay up, then this field will be sold to you. which Taisa discusses that, meaning to say that he's going to sell it at a cheaper price. But the point is that the field will be sold if he doesn't pay up the loan. Now, if the seller, which is the borrower, if in the interim period of the loan, he's like, don't worry, that you'll get the field in case anything happens at default, it's collateral, you make less. So fine. If the seller is eating the payers, he's using the field in that interim period. It's a mutter, that's okay, because no problem about ribbis, because fine, he'll get the field for the equivalent of whatever the loan was. That's not a problem. But let's say let's say in the meantime, the collateral, the likeach, who's the likeach? Who's the buyer? It's really the lender. The lender, I lent you $100. We made the field as collateral that's worth $100. Or 90, whatever, but it's 120, but you'll give it to me for 100. Be that as it may, but if I'm eating the payers, so then what happens is, says the Tanakh also, that's forbidden. Because essentially, that was a loan on interest. All this time, I had given you money, I lent you money, and if you pay me back the field, that's one thing. But if all this time I'm eating this payers, I'm taking interest from you on that loan. This is more than, right? Because it's not due yet, and therefore I'm taking interest on that all the time. All the payers I'm eating, $15 worth of payers I'm eating in the field. That's interest on the loan because it's not due yet. Now Rabbi Yehuda says no. Even if the buyer, which is the lender, is eating the produce, it's permitted. And Rabbi Yehuda, he says, he brought a raya, Rabbi Yehuda himself, said, he did this, he made his field into a sale based on Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, which again is this idea of someone owes money, and he's saying that, okay, it'll be a sale if I don't pay back, and in the interim, he's eating the payers of the field. But when it turns out that he can't pay the loan, he's like, okay, so now the field is yours. That means it was a loan all along, and all that time he was eating the payers of the field. Yeah, the consumer was eating the payers because that's what's known as tzad echad b'ribos. It's only one option because what happens if he doesn't? If he ends up selling it, meaning if he ends up selling it, then it's not going to be ribos because it was always his field. But if he doesn't, if he pays him back the loan, so all that time he was eating the payers is going to be ribos. So depending what's going to happen, there's two ways the story could end. If it was a sale, it's okay, it was my field. If it ends up not being a sale because he ends up paying it back, so that means all that payers he was eating was ribos, was interest that he was getting out of it.
So let's say he didn't eat the payers, and it ends up being his field. So you can ask the money back from the payers that was supposed to be mine?
If it ends up being a sale, not necessarily, because the sale is good.
It means it's not for the payers now, even Mafai.
I mean, let's say there's the loan from January to January, and it's for $100, and he says here's the field. It's the same equivalent as the loan. He says, this will be your field if I don't pay.
Yeah.
So if he doesn't pay and he gets the field, so it was always his field. It was a sale. It said it's going to be a sale.
Yeah.
So it was a sale, and it was eating his payers. That's fine. But let's say the guy could pay back the loan. So he pays him back the $100, and that means that all the payers he was eating in that whole year was on interest on that loan, because it wasn't sold as a field. Right? It remained by the borrowers. He ended up paying his debt. So all that payers that I was eating was grain ribos. It was for the $100 loan that I got him. I got all that payers. If he would have defaulted on the loan, it would have been retroactive. It would have been the sale. So good, it was my field. It was my payers.
What if he didn't eat the payers?
If he didn't eat the payers, so then what? And it was a sale.
And was a sale.
That's a different discussion. You want to know could he collect from him? I guess depends on how you qualify if it's retroactive, but not primary to our discussion over here. It's really a different. It would go backwards the other way to know does he owe that to me? Because it turns out that it was a sale. When the sale is in Mafrey, it's Mekalabo. But so the Tanakh says that yeah, it's ribos. Rabbi Yehuda says no. I'll bring you a story that you see Lekech ate the payers and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah sanctioned. They said to him, it's a right, you got the story wrong. Actually, the seller was eating the pears, not the buyer, and therefore that was okay because the seller was eating from it, not the buyer. And says what's the difference between Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanna Kama? Is tzarech and b'ribbis. The difference between them is when you have one option of the two options turning out that it's going to be ribbis. Marsa Rabbi Yehuda holds tzarech and b'ribbis mutter. When only one option is going to be ribbis, that's going to be mutter again, like we said, if it's through a sale. And that's how Remeir holds in our Mishnah. So the Remeir is not concerned that if, let's say, the shul ends up wanting the shul back, yeah, we'll give you back your 3.7. Oh, forget, great. That means I lent you 3.7, and I got all these years free rent, and that was ribbis. That's okay because tzad echad b'ribbis is mutter. But one option, even if that one option, if it ends up being ribbis, is going to be asr. So that's one interpretation of Machlekes in our Mishnah. Or Rav Ame says actually another interpretation of Machlekes in Yehuda and the Rabbanan, which would be the same in our Mishnah, is the kul emet tzad echad b'ribbis asr. Now everyone agrees. I don't care if it's not definite, but if it ends up being retroactive, it's going to be ribbis. It's going to be a problem. But rather, here the difference between them is if let's say something will be interest, but on the condition that we then give it back. That's the difference between them. Meaning to say, if let's say it ends up being that the guy he ends up paying his debt, so it turns out I was eating the pears all along. It turns out it wasn't really a sale. So it turns out I was really eating that guy's pears, and now it's really interest. Fine, no problem. I'll pay it back. I think you're going to default. So fine, I'm eating from the pears right now because it's going to be a sale. It's going to be my fault anyway. What happens if it turns out that, let's say the shul, as Taisa says, Rabbi has to be like a Yehuda. What happens with the shul if, let's say, it turns out the guy wants his, we want the shul back. He has to we have to give him back the money. Turns out he was living rent free, and that was ribbis. That the $2,500 a month, whatever it is, that he was getting off for $3,000 whatever a month, and that's ribbis interest on his loan. No problem. Like Taisa says that we have to stipulate that if it ever ends up happening that we're going to take the shul back, we'll give you back. You'll give us back the money. You'll pay us back rent, so it won't be ribbis. That's the machlekes. As the Gemara explains, that Marsav Rabbi Yehuda held ribbis amanas lachzim mutter. That if you do ribbis in the condition that if it ends up being ribbis, you'll give it back. So that's not a problem. But Marsav also, but Tanna Kama held that no, it's going to be forbidden, and therefore that's the same machlekes in our Mishnah, and that's the same machlekes in the Brisa. So that's two interpretations, either because tzad echad b'ribbis, or ribbis amanas lachzim, and therefore Rabbi is not concerned for the problem about ribbis because they could stipulate that if we want to, we're going to get our shul back. Now the Chacham, if we send the Mishnah, they say, no, not like Reb Meir that you have to be able to stipulate that we want it back. You could sell it a eternal sale. And Rabbi Yehuda he says, for everything. The Chacham said that there's 4 things you can't do. Rabbi Yehuda says you can do whatever you want. Now, relating back to the halacha of the Mishnah, the Gemara first brings in the following teaching of Amar Rabbi Yehuda Mishmol. So, it's permitted for a person to urinate, within 4 amas of having davened, meaning within the daled amas of where he davened, as long as he waited a certain amount of time, he could urinate. So Amar Rabbi Yisrael says, "My kamash malon, what are you coming to teach us?" Tanina, we learned this in the Mishnah. He said, "You could tell a shul to be as a courtyard. The consumer, whatever he wants to do, he can do with it. So obviously, if a person wants to urinate, he can urinate. And so what's the chiddush of be saying that as long as a person waited, he could urinate within Dal Amos of where he davened? Because even the Rabban who said that you cannot make it into a Beis HaMayim, you cannot turn it into urinals, this is only Beis HaKnesses, it's only a shul. The Kavi Kedushasa, which had a permanent Kedusha, you cannot turn that into a Johnny on the spot, a Dal Amos. But if, let's say, you daven Dal Amos of where you daven, the Kavi Kedusha, that's not a permanent Kedusha. If you just happen to have daven over there, of course that wouldn't be a problem. Therefore, there's no chiddush in the teaching that you're saying. Of course, you could urinate within Daled Amos where you daven. Now, once we brought that in, because it was related to halacha of the Mishnah that we said it was unnecessary, so the Gemara brings other related halachas. There was a teacher of Brises who taught the following Bryce of other of Nachman. Hamispal, someone who davens, he has to first distance himself, Daled Amos, and then urinate. So to Mashkin, if someone urinates, he has to distance himself Daled Amos and then go daven. Shouldn't daven within Daled Amos where you urinate. So as we just mentioned this halacha before, he says, what do you mean? I understand the second halacha that you said. that if someone urinates, he has to walk away 8 feet around and then go daven. That's Tanini. We learned that in Mishnah Masechtas Brachos. It says, "Kama yarchik ben eminatzaya." How far do you have to be from urine and from excrement if you want to daven? It's daled amas. So I understand that if you urinated, walk away. You're at Six Flags and you urinated in one corner, so walk away and daven 8 feet away. That's I understand. El mispal marchi daled amas amashlim. But if someone who davened, so he has zachkashakal, he's right before shki, he's davening with a minion, and he has to go to the bathroom. So I understand. So what does this mean that marchi daled amas amashlim? Everyone left already. And you have to walk away 8 feet and then urinate? Lamali, why would you have to do that? If that would be the case, that if you daven somewhere, you have to walk away 8 feet. That means that you would have sanctified all the pathways in Arda, because there is no Dalet Amas that some passerby didn't daven. So how are you allowed to urinate in any alleyway in Arda if someone must have davened over there? And like what? Because someone davened over there, you have to walk away Dalet Amas? So the Gemara says, right, no, today you have to amend the teaching, not to distance yourself, but rather yisha. You have to wait the amount of time of Dalet Amas. That was what these two halachas were. Not about walking away. It's about waiting that amount of time. So the Gemara says, okay, wait a second. So now I understand Bishlam and Mashna. I understand the halacha of that when you're urinating and then you're going to daven. So I understand yisha kedei hilach Dalet Amas, that you have to wait like the amount of time it takes to walk around 8 feet. After you urinated, Mishum Nitzaitz, it's because you have the droplets that shouldn't make your clothing dirty from the droplets of the male member. I understand you gotta wait, till it drips off, and then you go and daven. Fine. El mispal, but when you're davening, yishakadid hil dalet amas, to wait the amount of walking dalet amas. Lovely. Why do you have to wait? You finish, and then you go and you urinate. Why do you have to wait? Rav Ashi says no, because shekol dalet amas. Because the amount of time a person walks dalet amas, tefillah is seduda b'fiv. His prayers are still organized on his lips, but his lips are still mumbling the words of the davening, and that's the famous Marcheshvan, Menachshan Sifase from the. So again, you're still mumbling, so you gotta wait a little bit because you're still davening as you're walking into the bathroom, and you're like, slow down. You know what I'm saying? First finish davening, and then go in. So therefore, that was the halacha. It wasn't about distancing, because you don't have the distance. It was about waiting amount of time.
Not up to davening.
What?
Not up to davening.
Right, exactly, right. But let's say someone had the urge in the middle of davening. That happens sometimes. You got the urge and whatever, he's going right after, so wait. Again, because you're still mumbling the words. Now, Zalf and Simon is a simon for these interesting vignettes where tzaddikim lived a long, ripe old age. And people were asking him, what did you merit to live a long age? And because one of them is related to the halacha we just mentioned, so the Gemara gets into this whole discussion. So, Sholi Tamidah B'Reb Zakkai, that's the Zayin. Zalfun is the Zayin of Zakkai. The students asked Reb Zakkai, but Maharach the Yomim, with what merit did you live a long old age? So the Rebbe said, he said to them, my days I never urinated within Dalet Amas of where I daven, which Taisa says, even where it's totally permitted, like he waited the amount of time in Dalet Amas. But he didn't even urinate within Dalet Amas of where he davened. And I never gave a nickname to my friend, which Taisa also says, what's the chiddush? You're never allowed to give a nickname. But even if it's not an embarrassing nickname, and even then, he never did that. I never missed Kiddush of Shabbos, where it wasn't always so common to have wine. And he says, he said, I had an elderly mother. One time she sold the veil that she used for her head, the spitzel. She kept her just not the shait, so she sold the spitzel and her head. And she brought me Kiddush for the day. Again, that's how important it was. I never missed Kiddush. When she died, the mother was so into her son's Kiddush, she left him 300 barrels of wine. And when he passed away, he left over 3,000 barrels of wine. Guy had a good wine collection. But this is Reb Zakkai, who was very into Kiddush, never lived a long old age. Rav Huna, related discussion regarding Kiddush, have an aserisa. He actually, he had a gartel, a belt made out of grass, like a type of a reed. Amalei said, what's this naya patent, this naya gartel do mit gruz? Amalei says, look, lahavali kiddush, I didn't have money for Kiddush. I went to the store and I took my belt as collateral, but I saw big Kiddush and I was able to get money for Kiddush. Amalei said to him, let it be the will, the tatum, that you should be covered over and sealed with cloaks of bisharai, of silk. You should get so wealthy that you should be covered with silk. Now actually the bracha came true, ki ichlal Rabba Berei, when his son Rabba was going to the chuppah, so Rav Huna, who was getting this bracha, he was blessed by this because he sold his belt, he was collateral to get kiddush. Inish Gutzav, he was a short man. So Gana Puri, he went to lay down on the couch. And Asin Banse Bekalse, his daughters and his daughter-in-laws, they all came in Shulchan, they took off their gowns. And they put it onto the couch in the Chassan Shtibel. He was laying there, the Alta Yidel, the little kind of mention. They went and they put all their gowns, all their silk gowns, he taught them until he was covered with silk. So the bracha came true. So Shomad Rav heard about the story and he was bothered by this. Amay says, "My time why didn't you tell me when I gave you the bracha? And so to the master that you should also have the same blessing. Maybe it was an Eis Ratzin that would have been fulfilled also in me. The bracha that you should be covered in silk. You see, the bracha was makoyim." Related, the Gemara says, "Shalom Tamid Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua." Again, continuing with the next one of what do you merit a long old life? What did you merit a long life? Let me say to them, I never made the shul into a shortcut. I never went through one place to get to the other one through the shul. I never stepped over the heads of the holy people, meaning when they used to learn in the Beis Medrash, they would sit on the ground, and if someone's passing through to go to his seat, it looks like as if he's stepping over their heads. It says I never did that either. And I never went to Duchen Berches Kainim, below bracha without a bracha, because the Kahanim have to make a bracha. It says I never do without a bracha, and therefore those are the reasons why I was zeicha to arichas. Yom, thank you to any time.